I don't know about you guys, but when I first started playing ranked in season 15, my first impression was that the game felt very snowbally. It almost felt like whoever got first blood was going to turn that into feature strength. They were going to get boots upgrades. Boots felt really strong, and they were going to turn that into Atacon and they were going to win the game. That's how it felt to me. It felt very snowbally. And I feel like this sentiment was echoed through many parts of the league community, whether it be on Reddit, Discord communities, Twitter, etc. Now, I want to explore this, phenomenon because it's been proven already now through the data that the game wasn't nearly as snowbally as many of us may have seemed. So I want to kick off this video with this interesting X post from Riot Froxon. So after full 2 days of data, he wanted to give everyone an update what was happening in ranked. So he did a comparison between the end of season 14 and the beginning of season 15. So we see here the first blood win rate basically actually didn't change at all, and if anything went down. The first turret win rate barely changed. And then the Baron win rate barely changed, and other major objectives such as inner turret, dragon, rift herald, etc., were basically the same as the previous patch. And obviously, you have stats this like Atacon win rate and things like that. Well, again, Atacon win rate is obviously very high because if you're in a position to secure Atacon, typically by 20 minutes, just like it would have been Baron, you're typically in a very good position for the game, right? You're typically in control. You have vision. You're probably stronger than the enemy, et cetera, et cetera. So these stats in terms of feature strength win rate and Atacon win rate don't really tell us a lot about the balance of these particular things. They just let us know that you're probably already in a very good position. And that's why he goes on to say objective win rates are also related to how far ahead a team is just by playing and getting ahead normally through kills and farming. So these win rates need to be interpreted with that in mind. So obviously, this was very shocking. When I saw this, I couldn't believe it. I think there's no way. Was I that delusional about how season 15, what the balance of season 15 really was? He goes on to then talk about how they didn't really think snowballing in the new season was much higher than the previous season, if at all. Snowballing in the first season, in season 14 was actually maybe even higher. They took a lot of preventative measures to reduce snowballing heading into season 15, such as early home guards, increased XP range, removing gold from first blood and first turret. However, the perception was that snowballing was higher, and he believes it was something to do with the visibility of the feats reward, which makes it feel like a game was inherently more snowbally than it actually was. And a lot of people actually looked over this in the patch notes, whereby they actually replaced the gold bonuses from first blood and first turret while adding the feats of strength, which is something that I actually completely looked over as well when I was looking over the patch notes. I automatically went to, feats of strength, how do you get it? What do you get from the boots? Boom, boom, boom. And I completely skipped this over. And a lot of people, I think, failed to realize this. This is why feature strength was fundamentally not as impactful as many people may have thought. So I guess in this video, I want to explore 3 things. I want to try to understand and explore why did a lot of us have this false impression about how snowbally the game was? What were also the psychological factors at play within a new season, a new patch, and the significance of labels and identity attached to rank in League? So where I want to start this video is this concept called the Beta Meinhof phenomenon, I think it's also known as like the frequency illusion. Basically, it refers to the false impression that something happens more frequently than it actually does. And this often occurs when we learn something new. Suddenly, this new thing seems to appear more frequently, when in reality, it's only our awareness of it that has actually increased. Now, this article goes on to talk about how it's a combination of 2 mechanisms, selective attention and confirmation bias. So basically, selective attention means that because our attention is a limited resource, in order to be more efficient, our brains allow us to do 2 things: select the most useful information depending on the context or task at hand, and disregard all other information that we don't need. Thanks to selective attention, we can focus on what matters, filtering out less important details. And so when we learn a new word or set our mind on buying a particular blue car, this information is interesting to us. For this reason, it stays front and center in the brain for a period of time. This leads us to notice the things that interest us more. So I believe that this was definitely a play when it came to specifically feats of strength. So in our mind, it's like, okay, First blood, first blood means that they're going to be getting feats of strength potentially. When they get feats of strength, oh my God, the game is much harder. They get this massive buff. And we're focusing so much attention on this particular thing because it's essentially front and center. This, in combination with confirmation bias, enhances the phenomenon further by making us look for things in our environment that support our preconceived ideas. And the idea meaning, feats of strength is really strong. Whoever gets that buff is probably going to win the game. And then again, that's kind of where we're kind of more likely to disregard information that doesn't comport with this view of reality. And then again, further reiterating this idea. Now, the question then becomes, well, why was this the case? Why were we so rushed to, again, focus all of this attention on feats of strength? Why was this so important to us? So I think it's important to understand what happens at the beginning of a new season, right? When you enter a new season, there's a lot of changes, whether it be items, game pace, and this season was quite a lot, right? Minions, durability change, home guards from the early game, TP changes, new objectives, rift timers, Adacon, so much was going on. So inevitably, whatever was happening with that patch, our mental stack was going to be overloaded, and we were likely going to feel incredibly uncomfortable in an environment that we were previously feeling uncomfortable. So a lot of the time, we're going to be losing games because we're just making dumb decisions. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know that we don't have familiarity with the pace of the game, the feeling of minions. Should we go for that roam? Should we not? How much are we going to lose for that roam? What is the value of feature strength? How much should I prioritize getting first blood? How much should I prioritize getting those neutral objectives? Should I give it? Should I not? There's a lot going on. And inevitably, a lot of us are making bad decisions. And as a result, we're going to be losing games, right? And so for us, the most convenient kind of way of scapegoating our poor decision making, or just accepting that we don't know how to maneuver or go about this new patch, is to blame it on something that is the most obvious to us. And the most obvious thing, the easiest scapegoat, the thing that is plainly obvious in the front of our face is feats of strength. It's like, boom, first blood. Oh my God, you see it on the hard. You see this, they get this boots upgrade. It has to be the reason why they are snowballing this game and winning. In reality, the team that was getting a lead was probably just snowballing the game purely because a lot of people's mental stack was overwhelmed and it was kind of turning into a bit of a stat check fest, right? Everyone was mindlessly fighting. People at the beginning of the season don't really know how to trade objectives. People were more inclined to just fight because it's the only thing they know how to do because everyone's mental stack is overloaded. So if you did get a bit of an early lead in the early lane and you did manage to accrue the feature strength, people were probably just more inclined to win a lot of those fights, on top of the enemy or the opposition feeling demoralized because it was made out to be this massively big deal. And so I think a lot of us subconsciously were looking for some sort of a scapegoat, right? Because it's difficult for us to take responsibility for why we're losing the games. It's difficult to just be like, you know what? I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I don't know how to win this. I don't know how to maneuver this patch. I don't know what the best decision is. So we look for some convenient explanation a lot of the time. We look for some convenient explanation for why is it that, I feel like I'm losing so hard in the early game. Rather than taking accountability and getting into the details and be like, you know what, I probably shouldn't have gone for that kill when my jungler was on the other side of the map. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have roamed bot and lost 3 waves mid. I probably shouldn't have contested that dragon. We probably should have given that. These are not really the sorts of discussions we were having. We were having the discussion of, wow, feature strength is so OP. Whoever gets Adacon is going to win the game and blah, 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 blah. And I think this ties into this really fascinating concept that is commonly found in psychology, this whole idea of the internal locus of control versus the external locus of control. So essentially what this is that if we have this focus on the internal locus of control, we're more likely to take responsibility for our actions. We're less influenced by the opinions of other people. We typically feel confident in the face of challenges. We typically want to take more responsibility for our mistakes and understand how we are contributing to situations. Whereas the external locus of control is we tend to want to blame outside forces for our circumstances. We want to, say it's things such as luck or chance. We don't believe that we can really change our situation through our own efforts. And I think that when the new season happens and we feel like we lose control over our environment and we don't really know how to respond to particular events immediately, we tend to shift into this kind of external locus of control. We tend to kind of enter this state of mind where we want to shift responsibility, shift accountability. And again, the logical question is, why do we want to do this? Why are we so, vulnerable to this line of thinking? Why are we so quick to shift accountability and fail to really adopt this problem solving mindset? And it all ties into this whole idea that, you know, often our own perception of our identity completely coincides with our rank. And this is a sad state of affairs, right? Because if we perceive, you could replace identity with the word ego, but I've noticed that when the rank reset happens and we see that, okay, we've gone from platinum all the way to silver, our entire worldview revolves around, how do I get back to platinum as fast as humanly possible? How do I redeem myself? How do I prove to myself that I'm a platinum player, that I can show the world, and I can show myself that I'm this platinum player that deserves respect? Because in a way, when we see the term platinum, we don't just see this kind of objective level of play. We have this kind of idea of what a platinum player is. It's this status thing. It's this, I'm this cool platinum player, or insert whatever the tag is, because it's all relative, right? Whether it's an emerald or diamond or master, whatever the hell it is, whatever kind of floats your boat, right? We attach our self-worth, we attach, our identity to our rank. It's a part of who we are for a lot of us, because if you're playing League and you're getting to platinum and above, you're getting to any rank, you're putting serious time into the game. League is an important part of your life, whether you're aware of it or not. You're putting thousands of hours into the game, or hundreds of hours into the game. So it's an important part of our identity. It's an important part of our self-worth for a lot of people. But if you don't make this observation about, you know what, I think I probably do have this toxic perception of rank. I probably am not doing a great job of separating my self-worth at an individual level to my rank. If you don't make that kind of, connection, you don't understand what's going on, what's going to happen is that every single loss that you have, every single mistake that you make, you're not necessarily just losing LP. You're actually lowering your inherent self-worth. You're lowering or decreasing your inherent kind of self-value or levels of self-respect. And this is the case for a lot of people. And so I think when it comes to this whole, why was feature strength this massive big deal? Why did people feel like the game was inherently snowballing? I think this conversation can't really be had without really taking into account the early season, shenanigans about rank resets, people being unfamiliar with their environment, wanting to shift accountability, enter that external locus of control, and find a reason such that they can blame it on an external, such that they don't have to take accountability. There is a reason that they are losing. There is something out of their control. So it's almost like a defense it's like an ego protection mechanism. It's a defense mechanism that's subconscious, that's so powerful that it prevents us from being logical about what's actually happening in your games. And you would typically see this is the case because a week later, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, as you get into the patch, you'll be like, yeah, that actually wasn't that strong. I could probably just give that, or I could have made these decisions that are completely different. I'm seeing that in my own gameplay. I'm looking over my own replays of the first few days of solo queue and being like, what am I doing? Why don't I just play the game of League of Legends normally? Why am I overcomplicating the game? And I was unable to see the severity of my mistakes because I was so jacked up. I was again in this external locus of control, focusing on all these things or allocating so much energy to all these things that are out of my control. And this also ties into this whole discussion of this concept of self-handicapping. So self-handicapping basically is this kind of ego protection mechanism where we engage in actions that undermine our success to avoid having to face the truth and accept our own deficiencies. And I think this was definitely the case at the beginning of this season, and it kind of still is for a lot of people, right? So for example, what would typically happen is that someone would die first blood. And then their narrative in their mind is, feature strength is OP. I want to confirm this belief and narrative because it's convenient for me and it will allow me to save face. Therefore, I kind of want to give up in this game subconsciously to kind of prove that my narrative still exists. And I found this, and specifically, I found this in relation to secondary role. I've got a mental block with my secondary role where when I get secondary, a part of me kind of subconsciously, like deep down, if I'm really honest with myself, wants to lose that game in a really self-sabotaging, toxic way to kind of prove I'm like, I told you it's because it's the secondary role. It's the system. It's riot. It's not me. So rather than taking accountability and actually trying to improve my secondary role, I kind of want to prove that the system is against me because it makes me feel better again. It makes me feel better about myself. It protects my ego. So it's like, I think a lot of us engage in this self-handicapping, especially at the beginning of the season, whether it be, again, in relation to how impactful First Blood was or how impactful Feats of Strength was holistically. And so I found this absolutely fascinating, tying back to the initial post about how Riot, and we had this conversation with Riot Fox on the Broken by Concept podcast about how, you know, they don't want League to be balanced because when League feels balanced or is objectively balanced, the game doesn't feel fun. So they're trying to skew it towards perception. They're intentionally making the game maybe less balanced in certain regards because again, the community's feeling of the game is a completely, like, we have a different perception of how the game actually is, right? And so Froxon goes on to talk about how for now we are skewing further towards perception because players generally think that these things are extremely overpowered, a stance that we disagree with, but we can see why players think that would be because of the increased visibility on these objectives and getting feats correlated with winning, right? And again, that ties into the whole, feats are now this obvious thing, it pops up on the HUD. Everyone gets impacted by it now rather than before. It was just kind of localized gold. If someone gave First Blood, for example, it was just like, if you're a bot laner, for example, and top lane got First Blood, you wouldn't really give a shit about that because it had no bearing on your individual lane, at least for the immediate future. And so now that it's like this big deal on the HUD, big buff to everyone on the team, again, even though objectively it's not really this massive advantage because it's so painfully aware, we're so aware of it, our perception is that it's strong, that's influencing our psychology, furthering this whole idea that we should give up and again enter that external locus of control and potentially even enter that kind of self-handicapping kind of mentality. And then he goes on to kind of talk about in the future, even if the stats look good, some changes create too much friction, and how it feels matters just as much as the numbers. We wanted fees to create more reward satisfaction, focus, and tension around prioritizing early objectives. We've been starting to see some players experience some sort of dynamic and fun game states that we saw when playtesting. But currently, though, even if the actual game impact is reasonable, it's clear that First Blood is causing too much friction for the satisfaction and clarity of gaining it. As a result, we're going to change it so they're not going to be having feature strength obtainable through First Blood anymore, so on and so forth. So I guess what I take away from this whole experience is that, it just shows how impactful, the psychological aspect and our perceptions of what the game really is. And yeah, I guess the psychological aspects of how it impacts our performance on the Rift. And there was this fascinating story a while ago. I'm going to butcher it. Whereas I think it was like a Vlad update, right, where they said they were gonna change something about Vlad, or they were going to nerf it, or whatever the hell it was. But the patch never went through, and then the win rate of Vlad changed. I think it went down because the perception was that the champion got nerfed. So simply the perception of the fact that the champion got nerfed changed people's idea of the strength of the champion, which made them play worse, and again inherently changed the win rate, even though nothing changed about the champion. So I think this whole experience really, hopefully, and through this video, hopefully allows us to be a little bit more forces us or incentivizes us, I think that's the better word, to be a little bit more introspective in terms of how is my mental state actually impacting my performance on the Rift? And rather than jumping to all these conclusions, why don't we just take a step back, block out the noise, do some serious self-introspection and get into the details rather than jumping to conclusions, and have that idea of such as, maybe I'm wrong. Yeah, maybe I feel this way, but rather than jumping to that conclusion, let's give it some more sample size. Let's corroborate maybe with some other people. Let's stress test this idea before again entering that kind of self-sabotage mindset. And I'll say the last thing that I'm really struggling with, and I think Riot also struggles with, is, Riot want feedback, right? We want feedback from the community. We want people to be vocal about how they feel playing the game. But at the same time, it's very difficult to kind of comb through what is genuine feedback in regards to, how the game feels and what the game should be versus just sheer perception and bias and these opinions that are wrought with cognitive biases. And I think that that's something that I'm even struggling with. Like when I hear feedback, when it comes to anything, how valid is this critique? How valid is this criticism? So, hopefully, I've given you some more questions to ponder. I don't have all the answers. I'm just kind of sharing you where my current head is at. I think this really warrants more videos on this topic. I probably want to explore this a little bit more, but I found this a fascinating psychological observation. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let us know. Otherwise, I'll see you for another video soon. Cheers.